Defiance today from New York Republican Congressman Chris Collins, vowing to continue his re-election campaign and fight federal charges of insider trading.
The charges that have been levied against me are meritless, and I will mount a vigorous defense in court to clear my name. I look forward to being fully vindicated and exonerated, ending any and all questions relating to my affiliation with Innate.
Federal prosecutors allege that Collins used insider information he got as a board member for Innate, an Australian biotech firm, to help his family make illegal trades and avoid losing more than $700,000. The Republican has been one of the president's most vocal supporters. He was actually the first member of Congress to endorse him back in 2016. Daily Beast reporter Justin Glaw has been following this story and joins me now. So lay out the prosecution case for us.
It's pretty simple. They have emails from Innate's CEO to Collins saying essentially that their loan product, what they had expected to make millions and tens of millions of dollars on, had failed. And then, the prosecution after that then has phone calls that Collins made to his son. And
that video, I mean, he's at
the
White House and there's a video and the timing, there it is. Pretty much exactly when they say that those phone calls were happening, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just pretty stunning that, this guy, this is a pretty clear-cut insider trading case. He had material non-public information. He gave it to his son, who then used that information to make a trade that he otherwise probably wouldn't have made. So when he says that the charges are meritless, that's just not like my reading of the indictment, and I think that the government would say the same thing.
I think for a lot of people, at least just anecdotally, they're like, how is it possible that members of Congress could serve on a board anyway? Does this raise larger questions about exactly some of the outside stuff that members of Congress do?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. In the press conference, he says, he sort of touts himself as saying, well, I didn't take any compensation to serve on this board. Well, what he doesn't mention is that the Stock Act requires members of Congress that if they do serve on corporate boards, that they're not compensated for that. So he's essentially saying that, he should get credit for following the ethics rules and then the Stock Act, too. He kind of does the same thing when he says, well, I didn't trade on the inside information that I had, but then he doesn't also add that he was legally prevented by Australian law from trading because there was a trading halt because of the announcement about the drug trial that was coming out.
What's the sense of his defense? Because, look, he's going to continue to run. He's not stepping away, obviously. He thinks he can get reelected. He is in a district where he's been leading the Democrat by a significant margin. Is this just a situation where he figures he can't be touched, at least in the political realm?
I assume so. The guy was under investigation by, the Office of Congressional Ethics when he makes the phone call from the White House, giving his son the insider information. So, he just seems to think he's untouchable. But the problem for voters in Western New York is that if they reelect him, and if he is convicted of these charges, he's not going to be able to perform his duties as a member of Congress. So they're going to be completely unrepresented if that happens. And if he's really going to fight it and not eventually plead out, I think the odds of the government winning this case are pretty substantial.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.